Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Art of Protection, where the author and I discuss all things related to close protection, utilising designated, incidental, and counterintelligence. In this episode, I asked Michael a number of generic questions about some of the remaining chapters. We talk about a number of topics, including operational planning, dynamic thinking, emotional intelligence, training the mind to remain vigilant at all times, family security, client budgets and their impact on security, dealing with the paparazzi, culturally unfamiliar environments, interacting with powerful figures, and lastly, continuous professional development. I hope you enjoy this episode.
All right. I'm ready. I don't know what's coming, but I'm fucking ready. Let's go.
Welcome back. How are we?
Good, thank you. I'm in pain today.
Oh no.
I'll be all right. My shoulders are playing up. Be all right.
Tell us what happened with your shoulder.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll tell you. Okay, so if anyone gives a shit, basically I had a bad shoulder injury. It consists of three main elements. Basically, I have a torn muscle from my pectoralis major, I think it's called. That's torn from my sternum, so obviously a lot of pain here. I've got a ball of blood here. It's called a hematoma. So it's
it just stays there.
Yes, it's still there now. It's not as bad as it was. It's going down a little bit, but they don't want to drain it because they think I'm antagonized the sort of muscle damage or nerve issue. There's a fracture here somewhere. Like, honestly, that's not even painful. And then there's a trapped nerve behind my left shoulder blade, and that's what's really causing me the issue. So the trapped nerve somehow travels around. They're connected. So if I move so as to antagonize or irritate that nerve there, it sort of flashes around and causes pain here as well. It's really annoying. So I can't really sleep that well, and I've had 5 hours sleep every night as opposed to my usual 8 because.
So you'll not take melatonin or something?
I've run out of melatonin, and honestly, melatonin is
not
good.
Strong enough.
No, it gets you to sleep.
It gives me really, really weird dreams.
Does it? Yeah. Well, I always find it gets me to sleep. I'll just wake up again.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And also, I get a bit of a hangover the next day. I feel groggy, but I have taken 3 or 4.
It does do that for a bit. Oh, 3 or 4?
Yeah, and the 10 milligrams.
Fuck it. Yeah,
and greedy. I like the taste of them. It's like a little gummy bear. I have got the gummies, not the tablets.
I've got the ones from Canada, which are the actual tablet. They dissolve in your mouth, and you can spread them around like with.
These lads are bits like wine gun. So if I'm a bit hungry, I've got some strawberry ones. I could eat whole lot.
Or sleep dribbling gum tight, but.
Anyway, so operational planning. That's why we're going to start off with today.
Good. I wish I revised the book before coming to this bar, right?
It's not too difficult.
No, it's all right. All right.
So, question 1: what inspired you to write? Go back to the book.
Yeah.
To write the operational planning chapter. You write it in a different way. You write it with bullet points, quite in depth.
Yeah.
Why is this?
It's because it's different every time. Hence the art of protection. That's why the book's called that. But it's so subjective. So, and I know I keep going back and using that same word, but it really, really is. So. Anyone that comes to a consultant like me or someone who's got experience in this field and say, look, tell me how you would implement a security operation. It's not really possible to come up with a generic answer. It's like, well, first of all, we need to have a discussion about your situation. Why have you decided that you need security in the first place? Has something happened? What's happened? Who's responsible? And some of these, the answers to some of these questions are not going to know. We need to say, right, these are all of the things. Well, the way I've approached it, I think at least, is we need to delineate all of these things that need to be taken into account. Some of them won't be relevant or applicable, but at least they're there. And anyone, again, who's applying this sort of theory to a practical scenario will be able to do so, but it is subjective.
And I think, did you write it in that way? Correct me if I'm wrong. Just because for me, it felt more like operational planning. When I think of planning, I think of bullet points. Don't know if that's just a coincidence, but
it might be we have similar sort of thought processes, but I at least prefer bullet points because it covers most ground. I mean, I'm a waffler, right? Anyone watching this now will have arrive at the conclusion I can just answer a question in multiple ways, right? So I feel like if it's something that needs to be applied to a varied sort of sequence or series of contributing factors, then it needs to be bullet points, I think, to a certain extent, because you need to kind of pick or select whatever's appropriate and necessary at the time. It's difficult to have, a list that's applicable to every single scenario. That's not the case. So I prefer to do it like that. I think I've contextualized it as well. I think it probably at that time when I came to writing that chapter that I thought, well, this really does need to be contextualized. And so what I've tried to do is say, well, let's do 2 different scenarios. And then I went back through the book and kind of applied each scenario to each chapter, which took a long time, as you can imagine.
Can I just clarify? Even though you say you're a waffler, the book's actually not a waffle. It's very, very easy to read. Like, I'm not a massive reader, to be honest. If I opened, and I feel like the way that you've written it out, if I opened it and it was just pages of writing, it's quite like blocked off. Do you know what I mean? So it seems easier to read and attack.
Yeah.
And it's got pictures in, which is great.
Yeah, there are pictures. I've avoided putting too many pictures in, but no, thanks for that, because it is something that I try to focus on. I mean, verbally, when you ask me a question, I will answer with the longest possible fucking answer. I would just go on and on and on.
Which is great for me. You fill the time up.
Exactly. Yeah, it's good that you've minimized your screen time and questions, so it's all good. But no, jokes aside, I think the book and a course has to be kind of broken down into sections. And obviously, when you're writing, it's different to talking because typing is more laborious and it's more formal as well. When I write as,
Do you actually physically write it when you write it?
No, with a pen. No. Oh, no. No, I don't do much with a pen. That's why you've been allowed to take my pen. Which I'm obviously not getting back. That's okay. No, I don't use pen and paper. I very rarely do because I'll lose it. It's like I never carry cash. I always lose cash.
Oh, I'm so bad with cash.
Yeah, so I never have cash.
It's like Monopoly money.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm tight as well, so I think I'm holding on to it. I'm really but it just falls out my pocket. I misplace things sometimes. So no, if I wrote a whole chapter, by the way, a chapter can take anywhere between 2 hours to in some cases, a week. Not full time, but here and when it's sort of ad hoc. And if I was to lose that, I'd be heartbroken. So no, I think it's better to write it down. And honestly, you've got spelling mistakes that will be highlighted and grammatical errors that can be checked as well. So, and you won't lose it either. I do it in the cloud, so that'll be lost.
Yeah. And how did you decide which elements are non-negotiable in a protection plan under tight time?
Well, I don't know. Again, it's too subjective, I think. If I'm being completely honest, I've not looked in that chapter for a few months now. So I will probably say, understanding the threat is number one priority. If there is I'm always working on the assumption that there is some sort of threat.
Yeah.
Understanding the principles, kind of personalities, really in practice, and not in theory, but in practice, you need to understand the personality, because all of your operational planning, without having spoken to a principal, is just kind of go out the window potentially, because they're just a bit too demanding, or they have no respect for what it is you're trying to achieve in terms of security effort. So I think, operational planning or attributes, I think understanding the threat, I think understanding, the nature of the threat, and sort of at least doing some very, very basic research into who issued that threat and what their modus operandi is. So there's a whole piece that we could discuss about threat assessments and all that kind of stuff. But knowing the modus operandi of the threat giver or the threator, as it were, then you are then at least in a better position to provide countermeasures that are commensurate with the threat, commensurate with the threat. And that is modus operandi, first of all, essentially is Latin for the way in which someone operates. That's not obviously the literal translation, but I think it's just mode or method of operation. So how they operate, identifying what they may or may not do. Next step is to implement relevant countermeasures that are completely in line with the threat, so it's proportionate.
So you talk about something called Operation Mayfest.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on how improvisation plays a big part in a role in high pressure situations?
Improvisation in terms of
using, let's say, Op Mayfair.
Yeah. And I think in terms of thinking on the feet, that's what you mean. Then we spoke about it loads already, and I think we'll probably end up being able to dig up footage from previous recordings, because there's so many different things that can happen out on the ground that you just can't predict. even silly things. And I'll give examples here. Even silly things like someone drunk, a really drunk person accosting the principal on the street. You just can't account for that. You can't predict that's going to happen. So you kind of feel walking past a crowd of drunk people, obviously. But again, that's dynamic. You have to think on your feet. I think the kind of answer to your question is having the ability to think dynamically and whilst keeping a clear focus on the primary objective is critical. Because if you're unable to adapt quickly and in real time, you're going to really struggle. And also, again, one of the other elements we've not really spoken about that much is the principal's preference. They may well be a mind changer. They might be someone who's always late. Be like you. But no, jokes aside, that could actually genuinely be the case. And if they are late, then, there's going to be a knock-on effect throughout the day and potentially all of the planning and preparation from a security perspective as well. So yeah, thinking dynamically and the ability to adjust accordingly is really, really important for a CPO.
And how do you train your teams to continue to be flexible even when they've got to follow these detailed plans?
I think you just get to know it, honestly. We don't. We do and we don't. On the training programs, it's very much theory, because we have a criteria to meet that's set out by government, or regulators. So we have to get a first set of theory across. When we try to put it into practice, those theories into practice, we try to create scenarios that demands a level of thinking that's dynamic.
Yeah.
And quick reacting, because if you don't, then they're going to go out on the ground and into real life work and very quickly discover, perhaps to their shock, that actually, all of their planning and preparation may well be for nothing, but it may well go out the window because of poor timekeeping or the principal or a change of a mind or whatever it could be. So in terms of how we teach it, we can only really put it into practice in the live scenarios on any training program. But again, I would always emphasize throughout my delivery of a training program, which is 21 consecutive days usually, that it has to be something that's instilled in them verbally here and there, but reminded them in reality that they're going to come across this and they need to. But a lot of some people do struggle with it. I've seen learners on a program. We had one that he actually said to the principal, "You're late. Why are you late? Like what why?" Because he's ex-military, just left the army after being in there for 10 years since he was 17 years old. Couldn't get to grips with someone not being on time, and we had to have a conversation with him about the realities of civilian life. Unfortunately, a lot of people are like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, look, the short answer is I can say it as much as I can verbally to people on the training program or to people who are new in their career, but they will experience it very quickly. I think from my experience, nothing usually goes to plan in terms of the principal being on time and maintaining schedule.
And what would you say the role of emotional intelligence is?
That's a difficult one, only because I don't particularly do well with emotional intelligence. I'm not an emotionally intelligent person, honestly. I learn in a very different way personally. I learn that you can't say certain things to certain people. I've had to learn that the hard way, but I've got a pretty good memory, so I can sort of try to, store those somewhere in my little brain and figure out what to and what not to do in certain scenarios. And I think it's hard for me to answer that, because of that. Emotional intelligence is important because it feeds into the concept of interpersonal skills, and just a reminder of what that is. It's, to some extent, it's the theory of applying different communication skills, as it were, or modes or methods to different individuals. So I can speak one way to one person because they would prefer more harsh-minded communication, whereas someone would prefer more of a sort of nuanced and emotionally led discussion or conversation. So I think the short answer is yes, it is very important, but if you're asking me personally, I'm not an emotionally intelligent person, so I've had to navigate that personally.
Yeah.
If I did have emotional intelligence, I probably would have done better in my career, but didn't.
And how would you say that how would you train the mindset? This is kind of relatable as well. Obviously, you've just said that you probably have to train your mindset to think differently, to stay vigilant without being paranoid. Sorry, I said that because I was really trying to pronounce it.
Rick, did I get it right? Fuck, did you fuck get it right? You said vigilant.
Vigilant.
No, vigilant.
Vigilance, that's it. Without becoming paranoid or overreactive. So vigilance. So how would you train the mindset or teach people?
That's a really good question I had. It's a difficult one to answer. I've not seen these questions in advance, by the way. Anyone watching this probably thinks I've written.
Yeah, he has no idea what I'm asking.
No, I don't. So I'm having to answer these sort of dynamically, which is what this conversation is all about.
And at some point, it's probably no idea what you wrote.
No, yeah, and there are, honestly, I wrote 2.5 years ago, that some of it. So we'll do our best. But so no, generally speaking, and jokes aside, I think there is a sort of crossover between paranoia and sort of proactive vigilantism. If I've said that right. Try to say vigilantism, you'd have no chance.
Vigilantism.
But basically, yeah, I think I think you probably learn it over a period of time. I mean, when I would imagine there's a definitive sort of clear crossover. Anyone who's got experience, who have a team in front of them or with them, and they've got like a young man or woman who's just joined the team, and a more experienced operative who's 10 years in, that new operative is going to probably be reporting more sightings of suspicious individuals, as opposed to the sort of more experienced person, because the more experienced person kind of has sort of had that knowledge and experience as to what potentially is relevant and what is probably their mind potentially playing tricks on them. So I think the short answer, honestly, is experience.
It feels a pressure as well. I feel like pressurized that person was like not judging, but like, like watching me.
Yeah. No,
then it's like they obviously will if they're above you, but it's kind of like the pressure of like, how do people act under the pressure? Is of a fellow team person, not just.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. There's also the element of, are they testing me? Do you know what I mean? Because it's one of those industries, it's quite unique.
Yeah, is this a game?
That's it. Yeah, is this a test? Because all of these people are trading covert surveillance, if that's what we're looking out for. So then, yeah, why wouldn't they be testing me in that capacity? So I think, yeah, I just think it's experience. Honestly, I don't. What I wouldn't encourage though is if you have a feeling that something's important, push up the chain of command, because if you just ignore it and it turns out you did see something and your gut feeling was correct, it's not a case of, oh, you'll kick yourself. It could be life-threatening. So, yeah, look, just learn as you go. Report what you feel you need to, which in some cases will be everything. And I think experience will dictate what you then do in the future. And again, it's hard to really answer without any real examples and things like that, but I think we'd sort of digress into a different area. But sure, also I would say it's experience.
So family security,
yeah,
what would you say the most common challenges are with multiple family members in close protection?
Trying to juggle between them. So there are a couple of elements that will impact this. So the first one is how many security team members are there, and the second thing is how many family members are there. It could be the case that there's one, and I've been in situations like this where there's one security person, which was me, head of security for a family of 5, 3 children, two parents. One of the parents was away a lot, so that wasn't any of my concern. Once he was dropped off at the airport on the aircraft, dropped off at the airport and or on the aircraft, because it could have been a private airfield, that was no longer my concern. But if there's the wife and 3 children. Mm-hmm. And when I say children, they could be anywhere from toddlers to 30. They're still the children of the family.
Yeah,
it's not like they're actually children. So yeah, that's happened to me. It's effectively 4 people to 1, right? So that's very, very challenging. And the way we get around that is, to some extent, it's not definitive, but to some extent we can mitigate risks as much as we can, which is the house was very, very secure. All of the properties were very secure with on gate security and everything.
Oh no!
No, don't worry about it. That's just I've seen it. It's a shit out anyway. And literally one of them going out at a time, and they were quite concerned about their security anyway. They took it seriously, so it usually was 1 in, 1 out. Yeah, it was never a case of trying.
Without thinking, trying to juggle different people in different places.
Well, that is challenging. Obviously, that's really difficult, and it's also possible that if their budget doesn't allow for more security, then there's nothing you can do. Like, yeah, and it's, God forbid something happens, but if it does, there's nothing you could do as the security officer. But the other thing is if there's more than one of them out on the ground and you're tasked with looking after more than one person, that's really difficult because you've got, I don't know, two females perhaps, and you've got like one going off one way, one going off that way, and
and you have all like natural things and environments like family arguments, stuff like that, and you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, as you could, I've seen that loads. I've been with husbands and wives, and it's kicked off, and I've been with husbands and wives, and it's they go different directions. One's going that way, one's going that way. They're in the same building. So who do you prioritize? And
so you don't want to become a counsellor and situation.
Oh, that's the one. As an emotionally unintelligent person,
so people will like naturally as well. Like when you have arguments and there's someone there, you're like, "Oh no, right." Do you know what I mean? So they probably turn to you and ask your opinion.
I've had that loads. Yeah. And honestly, I'm just like, I'm not getting involved. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not getting involved. But yeah, he's a dick. Well, and no. I was
so right, babe.
Yeah. No, I'll never get involved in that side of things. Absolutely. I've been trying, and you are, because they trust you as well. They will try and, well, it's natural, I suppose. They trust you, right, with their lives in some situations. So they will turn to you for advice or your views. And honestly, I mean, I know I've learned the hard way that my views are probably best kept to myself. So yeah, that's what I.
And also, there's probably this sense of as well, it could go the other way. Like I've seen, like women are angry or they want to attack, like they'll probably end up turning around. If you're trying to protect them, they'll probably attack you at the same time.
I've seen it happen to someone else. It's never happened to me, I don't think. No, it's not happened to me. It happened to someone else. It happened to it was in the press. It was what's her name? It's Amy Winehouse. Her body. She attacked someone that was with her.
I watched the film about her. It was great.
I'm not seeing that. No, yeah, it does happen. It hasn't happened to me, Frank. If that did, I've got to be honest. That happened to me. That'd be it. That'd be the end of it. That's right. Fine.
Yeah.
Take it back home, and that's it. There's just things you can't tolerate, and violence towards someone you're trying to protect is unacceptable.
Yeah. And you mentioned in the book that wealth doesn't eliminate budget concerns. So how do you tactically manage unrealistic expectations from high net worth clients?
I think it's really, and this is such a good commercial question, because the realistic answer, enough, I know that people in my position are going to say, no, it's this, it's that, or not wanting to give the proper answer. And I think the real answer, honestly, is just about negotiation. Not for negotiation on financials. It's just about conversation. Say, look, this is the reality. This is the situation you're in. And I understand and respect there's always a budget. And if you don't like what we're proposing, of course it's going to be expensive. You don't like it, then we can negotiate alternatives, but they won't be as secure. The thing is with security, there is no end to it. Honestly, there is not. Because even if you look at the open part of the book or the summary of the book, it says, security is not definitive. Then nothing's definitive with security. There's always 1%.
The person yourself, like say if it was me, and you start to get the feeling of feeling secure, but then you always look into what more can I have, what more can I have. Like it's like a thing, isn't it? And then you want the best of the best as well.
Well, some people do, some people don't. And some people want the best of the best, and
you don't want to pay the price.
Pay the price. Yeah, it's like that analogy sometimes you see online. It was like Kyan's budget. It's like the Iron Throne from Game of Thrones with all the swords in it. It's like, sorry, Kyan's expectations, and then this the big throne and all the swords in it and all that. And then Kyan's budget, it's like a blow-up chair. But it's that sometimes is what it's like. I think if a client isn't willing to kind of meet the price or your suggestions in terms of what you're saying that they should have protectively, then again, it's just a conversation that needs to take place. But I mean, it's important that it's a documented conversation so as to mitigate risk to security if something happens.
Yeah.
The other thing is what I was saying earlier is that, security is never ending. Security protection efforts are never ending. So you could always implement this and that. If you look at ultra high net worth individuals who have not only specific threats sometimes, but have generic threats as well, and have got multiple residences. So it's the close protection, it's the residential security teams, it's the residential security itself. So that's the physical security around access and all the rest of it to the actual property, as well as CCTV and all that kind of stuff. But if you take residential security actually as an example, you can have CCTV and security outside of the property, residential security and gates and all that kind of stuff. But then some people want to go further. Some want pressure sensors around the property. In case there are already intruders, intruder alarms, panic alarms, safe rooms, laser detectors, things like that. All that, and obviously they might be concerned about bugging devices in the house. So then we go into technical surveillance countermeasures. How often are we having that? So that's just the realm of residential security. It is never ending. You can go more and more and more and more, and then close protection. Look at that. Okay, all right. We're in the UK. We've got a certain amount of close protection. What vehicles are we using? Are they armored? No, let's got armored vehicles. Okay. How often are the vehicles checked for bug devices and explosives? And just goes on and on and on. So security is never ending. So when you are, from a commercial perspective, kind of making suggestions to a principal, I think you've got to be quite cautious as to how far you go, because at some point they look at it and go, "This is ridiculous." You basically just try to sell me everything. Whereas another company I've spoken to, I've just said, "Oh yeah, close protection is, I don't know how much they charge per day, but like it won't do what we charge. We will definitely charge more because our operatives get paid more." So
Yeah.
There's a trade-off, and there is definitely a competitive commercial element to it.
And how do you train teams to like things like PAPs and things like that?
It's got to be hard. It is hard because, I mean, there are two ways to do it. One is to give them the theory and actual insight from experience, which I've tried to do in the book as much as I can. And the second way is to put it in practice. But to put it in practice, that means you're going to have to get a fake crowd of people that are genuinely pushing and shoving around.
And you never know where they're going to be.
Well,
I've been with through my friends that get PAPs, and sometimes we've been PAPed having lunch, and I've never even seen where the guy's been, ever.
Yeah, I think
It's got some secret agent skills.
Yeah, it depends on the value of the images. If there is a concern with a specific individual, that a photograph of them coming in out of a building, in my mind, and this is not definitively accurate in terms of what the definition of the word, but it's not your word, is it? But like being packed is, in my mind, coming out of a building and they're there. How to deal with that is, just provide body cover as best you can. But also, as I said in the previous recording, it's about negotiating with them. Say, look, understanding what your plans are.
Yeah.
So I say, look, do you mind? You get your shot and everyone's happy. Sometimes they won't play ball, honestly, but if they do, then that's great. If they don't, then it's going to be a bit of a rugby match. But it's going to...
In all honesty, I'm not saying it, I probably shouldn't even say it, but most of them want a bad shot for more.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. They don't even really... sometimes they want to show the best, but they love the drama.
No, that's what I was getting to next. Like some people, a bad shot is very, really, really valuable. Or in a compromising position, that is, I've heard of photograph being sold for like up £250,000 upwards. So yeah, like in terms of how we avoid that, and it depends on how important it is to the principal as well, by the way, because let's be honest, in some situations, those kinds of shots that make their way into the papers are beneficial to the principal, to the person.
Yeah, for sure.
Or the
it's all for the press.
Exactly, yeah. So I probably should say this, but I know for a fact that people tip them off.
Yeah, I know people that plan to have paparazzi like some people that I'm friends with have said, "Oh, Megan, we're going for dinner. There's going to be a pap there." That is planned.
Yeah, I've tipped them off because and it's beneficial. And also, like restaurants, certain bars and restaurants, things like that, they'll say, there's going to be a lot of press there. Basically, that means because the managers or someone else has told them, and they get free dinner or whatever.
True as well. It's is it Bruno Mars? He doesn't have pictures with fans and has never really been papped. It's like a thing. I can imagine, like, if a pap gets him, it's big money.
I don't know. I've never met the what.
Either.
No, I don't know. I have no idea. I can't speak to specific. Even if I had worked with him, I wouldn't be able to say. Yeah, I've genuinely never worked with Bruno Mars.
Would you catch a grenade for it?
No. But do it.
In the song, don't you?
No, of course I know you do. I was literally about to say, but I do want to be a millionaire. Which I thought might be a bit before your time.
Freaking bad.
That joke was so freaking bad, yes. Anyway, I think in terms of those wide angle shots where the photographer is concealed in a van or whatever, the reality is you're gonna, if you want to avoid that, it depends, on how desirous is the principal to avoid those kinds of shots. Because if they are really against that, if it's going to harm them in any way, reputationally or financially even, then they need a better, more observant security team so as to counteract it. Perhaps even counter surveillance. And that would be the only way to counteract that, is a proper counter surveillance team that would, easily outdo a photographer. Honestly, they would, because they're not professional surveillance operatives. Well, they are. I mean, to some extent, that's probably an unfair statement. I mean, to be fair to them, some of them are. Some of them are very, very good, and they make more money than surveillance operatives. Because, like I said, some of those photographs are worth a fucking fortune. So they are very good at it. But yeah, a proper counter surveillance operation, if it was an undesirable thing for them to be packed or photographed in a certain location in a certain scenario, then yeah. Oh, and by the way, not only because of reputation, well, reputation, I suppose, to some extent, but also if they're in a long-term relationship, marriage, whatever it is, then them being seen out in private, well, in a private setting with another man or woman or whatever it is, having an affair, then obviously that is very compromising. So they might want to really avoid that. Yeah.
And what strategies do you use to prepare a CPO for deployment in culturally unfamiliar environments?
Two ways, I think. One is bringing awareness to the fact that there are cultural nuances and differences globally, as we all know. Not only to be conscious of it when you're deploying to an environment where you're going to be working with someone from the cultural or geographical region, but also when they are traveling to places where you are. So, for example, they come from here, the UAE, to London, they need to be aware of it. The second thing is to kind of, I think there is a degree of like trying to kind of denote and delineate every single culture, but it's quite difficult because I'm trying to think of different cultures that would really, generically speaking. So going back a minute, right? Going back a step. The book is finished. The only thing that I was actually going to change recently, at the time of recording this, I'm still debating whether or not to add this into the book, because there is a cultural chapter, and it doesn't give specific examples. I think one of the specific things that I probably could do and would be beneficial to the readers is given specific examples, such as like Arabic cultures and sort of nuances that impact working with people from those backgrounds. Obviously from further east, such as China, and a multitude of others. I think having specifics would be beneficial, but again, I think, as time progresses, they may evolve slightly and they might change. And again, if I just think bringing awareness to the operatives and to the learners, the candidates and the readers, that there are differences, and part of your CPD should be to kind of keep an eye on those and sort of monitor what they are, identify the differences. But also, in theory, you would know in advance who you're going to work with anyway, so you've got the opportunity to do the research prior to working and engaging with them.
How do you train operatives to handle interactions with powerful local figures respectfully?
That ties into the last answer. I think it's to be aware of, well, there are different, actually slightly different. So protocol or protocols are different according to different cultures, and there are again different nuances based upon the rank of the officer they hold, and whether or not they're a member of a royal family or a royal household. So there are different elements to take into account, obviously. But for example, the way you would greet the British Crown is different to the way in which you might greet the Canadian Prime Minister. So those are very, very different things. The way in which you would greet a member of the royal family here would probably be different. So I think just creating awareness, and because there are too many political sort of diverse, political sort of offices around the world, that it's impossible to say for every one example. I think just making the operatives or learners, as the time of candidates, what you want to call them, making them aware at the time that there are different protocols, and they should be researched prior to meeting someone holding a certain office, and adhered to as and when appropriate. I'll give you an example. So it's not necessary for someone who is not a subject of the crown, the British Crown, to bow their head to a member of the British royal family when they meet them, but it is appropriate for a British citizen to do that. So things like that, it's just being aware of it, being conscious of it as and when you may be in a situation where you may be greeted by someone like that. I don't think there's any real kind of, it's different. It's different in terms of the cultural thing is more generic, and it's more of a macro view. But if you sort of zoom in a little bit into specific political figures and royal households and all those kind of protocols, that is slightly different. So in a nutshell, protocols, very different, but they're pretty a different set of sort of skills and knowledge set to have, as opposed to, the cultural piece.
And I don't know if you just answered my next question within that, but how do you stay informed about political and social tensions? Can they impact security detail?
Yeah, 100%. It's part of the daily intelligence reports, in fear of which aren't always done, by the way. So just to clarify, daily intelligence reports, the very basic level stuff is international news, national news, local news, and all the rest of it. So those three there kind of, at the very least, bring to the attention of the security team anything that may impact the principal. It may also just, again, a bit of a nuance here, but it creates a bit more of awareness so that it enables the conversation to take place between the principal, a generic conversation, not security related, but conversation nonetheless between the principal and the security team members, if there are some that would sort of engage on that level. With regards to what was the first part?
How do you stay informed about political and social tensions?
Yeah, I just think so if a daily intelligence report isn't something that's produced as part of the daily routine or weekly routine with the security team, then I'd cautiously suggest that operatives probably should keep an eye on the news and see what's going on. Obviously not taking anything away from the overall security or protective effort, but keeping on top of political affairs and all the rest of it, and is probably beneficial because it keeps you ahead in terms of what's going on. It's a point of interest anyway, and if you're ever engaged in conversation about it, at least you can hold your end up. Again, we go back to this kind of idea that the security industry has a bad reputation. Being completely ignorant to current affairs it's not going to sort of go down well if you're trying to maintain a sort of intelligence-led sort of persona. So keep it on top of them. It's not going to be hurtful. It's not going to do any harm, and it's pretty easy to do. You can just plug your headphones in. I listen to LBC every single morning. I listen to Nick Ferrari on LBC, and by the end of those 2 or 3 hours, I'm sort of up to date on everything that's going on.
Yeah. How do you balance blending in culturally, but still having a visible presence?
How do you blend in more?
Culturally. So say if you have got to blend in culturally, but you still got a Scottish. Is that what I've got?
No, it's just your accent. Sorry, go on. Ask me again. Sorry.
How do you blend in culturally, but still have a visible security presence? If necessary, you might not need to have a visible security presence, but
it depends. I think, again, as with everything, I don't know if I'll get the question, to be honest.
It basically means, say if you are in a different culture, like obviously you don't want to stick out like a sore thumb. If you're trying to be discreet being a coast protection officer, but also you have still got to have a visible presence.
Yeah, if you are having to maintain a high profile, then generally speaking, and this is where men have to kind of benefit being men here with regards to appearance, because as far as I'm aware, there's nowhere in the world where wearing a suit and tie is going to be frowned upon.
Yeah.
Women, on the other hand, female operatives may have to dress more formally. There are certain cultures where ankles have to be covered in hot environments, by the way. So not all that desirable, but nonetheless appropriate. Obviously, as we're aware, head coverings and whatnot. So I think in certain scenarios, it's hard to maintain a low profile if you are security. If you're maintaining a high profile, it depends if you need to visibly be security. In which case, you can, visible communications like the curly whirly earpieces and things like that. And I think in certain places that you're alluding to, not all, but certain places, there will be the necessity to have weapons anyway. So that's very high profile. So I think there's sort of common sense based rules that you can implement and adhere to with regards to maintaining a high profile, as long as the cultural requirements are adhered to. But like I said, I think generally speaking, wearing a suit and tie is never going to be frowned upon culturally.
Yeah.
Women, on the other hand, I think female officers have to unfortunately be a bit more conscious about where it is they're working, which is, I'm sure, is probably quite annoying, but it's just one of those things.
So moving on, obviously you mentioned at the start of this chapter, continuous professional development is a very, very big role in close protective officers. Explain why.
Well, because a lot of things change within the sort of the theory of what we do and what we do in practice as well. I think in every single session we've done recording these episodes, we've mentioned CBD at least once.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but we'll know more once it's published. But there are so many attributes, right? So if we look at, we just spoke about the cultural thing. So, continued professional development could be in relation to, okay, there's a necessity for me to learn about the sort of Chinese culture, because we have clients traveling from Beijing to London for a period of time, and I should probably do research into sort of some of the nuances that impact that. That is considered CPD. If, for example, we always encourage, especially on our training program, because to sort of provide the benefit of time that relates to intelligence acquisition, counterintelligence, and close protection, we've opted for the most basic version of first aid. If we were to build on that anymore, it would compromise the other kind of what we consider really important elements. So what we always suggest is, as part of the operatives continued professional development, take on board some further training in the medical realm, if that's of interest to you, and if you think it's of importance to the direction your career might take. We've also mentioned things like technology. So technology is always changing and evolving. We at the Vanquish group, we've got our own threat research team it used to be called Project Hudson, and it's now called Hudson Threat Intelligence. And they produce reports, I think twice a month, for our operatives. So they produce reports on new equipment that's emerging out of places like China, Taiwan, and all around, well, actually Israel, everything.
Yeah, sent up stuff.
Gets sent out to our operatives, and it doesn't only raise awareness as the fact that they're now available and what they are and how they operate, but also, more importantly, how to find them. So our TSM operatives, in theory, are like as up to date as they possibly can be in that sense. So that is CPD, but that's CPD being done on their behalf. As long as they read it, they are engaging in continuous professional development. So equipment that's available in terms of covert monitoring, that's one thing, but also Hudson Threat Intelligence will expand into other areas, such as threats that are posed by certain activist groups, such as anti-abortion groups, anti-globalists, communists, and all of these, Just Stop Oil, and all these other sort of activist groups that will potentially pose a threat to any specific principal or client base. So I suppose it's important, because if you do a training program and you stop there, then in theory, skill fade will set in, and your knowledge base will kind of erode, and it's just basic. It's a basic requirement to have. Instructors now are required to provide a CPD records to show how they're re-engaging with the areas that are covered within the training programs that we have and everything. So it is very important, I think. So
that kind of covered the question that I was going to ask next, which is, how would you recommend, or how would a CPO address like a skill fame if they're quite in a high pressure and they don't have time to have these refresher training courses?
I mean, if they're in a situation where it's high pressure and there isn't a lot of time that can be allocated for them to do it, then they have to prioritize, number one, which is protection of the principal. So yeah, I mean, and also because of the high pressure environment and situation that they're in, arguably they are as such conducting CPD perhaps vicariously because of what's going on. They're learning about different threats. They're learning about different scenarios. They are actually adapting and evolving in their own sort of mindset and career route as well. So I don't think CPD necessarily applies to something like that, because it would be very challenging for them. The benefit, like I say, and this sounds like a sales pitch, but at the Vanquish Group, we do have something called Hudson Threat Intelligence, which it minimizes the research and time necessarily required by any given operative, because we have our own team dedicated to providing that to them and helping them with it. And it's more articulated as well, so it's more directed, articulated, and better well documented for them to kind of look back on as well.
And why do you think, you mentioned in the book that cultural etiquette is often overlooked in close protection training, and how can this gap be better addressed?
Well, I can't speak for other training providers. I think good training providers would take it into account, because they would probably expect someone to go and work with someone from a different culture. Perhaps not immediately, but even with talent coming from across the pond, from Canada or from the US, they're from slightly different culture to us. In fact, America's very different, actually. I know, because I've worked there, and I was a bit shocked how different they do things, commercially speaking. So you will become acutely aware of it very, very quickly. If it's not delivered to you on a training program, then you need to understand, and I hope anyone that's done a training program that wasn't with Vanquish or a good training provider, that it is important, and you will now go and sort of look into anything that may impact the work that you do with someone from a different background to you, because it's going to have an impact,
Oh, yeah.
learning about, different cultures as well. I think, like I said, we specified different cultures. We sort of said Arabic and Chinese, but not to forget, when this war comes to an end in years to come, I think there will be a re-emergence of Russians in the UK again. They have different expectations than perhaps a British person would. So understanding all of that, Indians as well. There's a huge amount of millionaires and billionaires from Southern Asia. So understanding their kind of expectations as well, and the nuances as to what they do and don't like, and preferences and whatnot. Understand, try to focus on all of those, but only when they're relevant. If they haven't done it, then or if they've not done it as part of a training program, then I hope this raises some awareness, or at least the book does, or whatever, because it is honestly very, very important. It's career to changing potentially. If you make a mistake that they don't like and they find to be ignorant, then it could have a major impact on your progression.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be back for another episode discussing Michael's latest book, The Art of Protection. That was the final recording with Michael for this mini-series. We're planning to interview some of the contributors to this book, which will be published in due course. If you want to know more about the future podcasts from the Vanquish Group, follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for tuning in to The Art of Protection.